India and Israel aren't just two democracies doing trade deals. They are two nations with an almost identical understanding of what it means to be surrounded, challenged, doubted, and still rise. They've both lived with existential threats since day one. They've both built strength through struggle, innovation through isolation, and resilience through relentless pressure. And when you operate under that kind of pressure long enough, you start to recognize each other in ways others can't. Israel knows what it's like to survive with limited resources but unlimited enemies. And India, especially when it comes to the Kashmir issue, especially when it comes to POK, understands the long game of patience, pain, and precision. That's where the bond forms, not on paper, but in mindset. What makes this alliance so powerful is how quiet it's been. There's no loud noise because there's no need. What they're building together is too important to risk through vanity. You've got Israeli defense companies training Indian commandos in specialized combat. You've got Indian satellites piggybacking off Israeli AI to track heat signatures in hostile zones. You've got real-time intelligence exchange systems that are being tested and hardened not for a headline, but for a mission. This isn't speculation. This is preparation. People underestimate the value of trust in geopolitics. Not the kind of trust where leaders pose for photos, but the kind where militaries talk behind closed doors, where cybersecurity teams run joint simulations in real time, where crisis response units run silent drills that don't make it to the news. That's happening, and it's happening because both countries understand one fundamental truth. Survival isn't about talking. It's about being ready. Israel brings to the table a level of tactical efficiency that's unmatched. Whether it's drone warfare, anti-insurgency strategies, or psychological operations, they've proven they know how to move without being seen. And India, with its sheer size, human capital, and deep-rooted cultural resilience, is learning how to adapt these methods into something entirely its own. It's like watching a powerful machine being built. Israel provides the tools, India supplies the engine. When you look at POK through this lens, everything starts to change. This isn't just about reclaiming territory anymore. It's about reclaiming leverage, information dominance, and moral ground. India doesn't need to fight a full-scale war. It needs precision. It needs insider data. It needs a map that shows not just where the threats are, but how they move, think, and regroup. Think and regroup. That's the kind of intel Israel is helping refine. Not through flashy demonstrations, but through silent integrations. And let's not pretend this is all about tactics. There's a shared psychology here too. Both nations have faced years of being misunderstood on the global stage, called aggressors when they defended themselves, blamed for instability when they were simply refusing to fall. That shared pain becomes power. That mutual misrepresentation turns into mutual motivation. The real genius of this alliance is that it doesn't rely on dependence. India doesn't need Israel to do the job. And Israel isn't trying to run the show. They're exchanging strengths. It's a mutual upgrade. India gets agility and sharper intel. Israel gains reach, scale, and a deeper ally in a volatile region. Together, they're forming something that's leaner than NATO, smarter than most coalitions, and far more committed than most defense pacts. That's what makes the plan for POK different this time. It's not just Indian determination, and completely off the radar until it matters most. Because when the time comes, it won't be noise that announces the shift, it'll be precision. And by the time the world realizes what's happened, the lines will have already been redrawn. Everyone thinks power is about scale, about how many soldiers you have, about how loud your weapons sound. But real power, lasting power, is about precision. And that's where Israel's strategy becomes so important to India. Because if there's one thing Israel has proven time and time again, it's that you don't need to be the biggest to be the most effective. You just need to know exactly where to strike, when to strike, and how to make every single move count. And India, in the context of POK, isn't just learning from that, it's adapting it quietly, strategically, relentlessly. See, India doesn't need to light up the sky to make a point. That era of chest-thumping warfare is over. The new age is about silent dominance, about achieving impact without spectacle. And Israel has already mastered that playbook. Surgical airstrikes that dismantle threats without collateral chaos. Cyber operations that cripple networks before a single bullet is fired. Covert missions that dismantle insurgent leadership without creating a global storm. It's warfare without the war. And that kind of precision is exactly what India is building towards. People forget that precision isn't just a tactic, it's a mindset. It's the difference between reacting emotionally and responding intelligently. It's the choice to prepare in silence instead of retaliating in noise. And right now, India is applying that mindset to every layer of the POK issue. No grand declarations, no daily threats, just planning, just positioning, just patiently tightening the net. What makes Israel such a powerful model isn't just their military hardware, it's how they use it. Every tool has a purpose. Every strike has a message. And most importantly, every action is part of a long-term strategy. That's what India is absorbing, the art of long-game warfare, of never wasting energy, of never giving the enemy a reason to unite out of fear. When you move with precision, you don't just fight better, you shift the very psychology of the battlefield. And that's what this is about. Because reclaiming POK isn't just about taking back land, it's about dismantling an entire illusion. An illusion that the region is too unstable, too complicated, too far gone. But what if that's not true? What if it's just been handled wrong all this time? What if the answer isn't overwhelming force, but untraceable action? That's what Israel has shown. You don't need to bulldoze your way through resistance. You infiltrate it. You weaken it. You outsmart it until it collapses under its own weight. And then, when the time is right, you move fast, clean, final. India is already doing this, not in a way that makes headlines, but in ways that create results. High-altitude training for special forces in terrain that mirrors POK joint intelligence analysis using Israeli algorithms to monitor communication flows in the region. Disruption of cross-border supply chains without a single soldier crossing the line. It's all happening, it's all evolving, and it's all being done with the kind of strategic finesse that used to be missing from India's playbook. But it's not missing anymore. Now there's a clear focus. A clear recalibration of how this battle is going to be fought. No more unnecessary risks. No more rushed decisions. This is a new kind of mission. A mission that respects the power of patience and the brilliance of targeted force. A mission that doesn't aim to destroy POK, but to reclaim it with minimum chaos and maximum control. And maybe that's what people don't understand yet, that real power isn't loud. Real power doesn't broadcast its next move. Real power watches, learns, waits, and then acts with such precision, such confidence that by the time the world figures out what just happened, it's already too late to stop it. That's why Israel's strategy matters. Not because it gives India an edge, but because it sharpens India's own instincts. It reminds the world that strategy will always beat scale, that clarity will always overpower chaos, and that silence, when used with purpose, speaks louder than any war ever could. And when that silence finally breaks, it won't be with noise. It'll be with results. Everyone thinks the battlefield is about guns, tanks, soldiers on the ground. But the real battlefield today, the one that actually determines who wins and who fades into irrelevance, is invisible. It's intelligence, surveillance, data, not just reacting to what's happening, but predicting it before it happens. And right now, when it comes to POK, India and Israel are playing a game the world doesn't even realize is happening. A game of eyes. A silent, high-stakes operation where every inch of terrain, every signal in the sky, every heartbeat on the border is being watched, mapped, logged, and prepared for. This isn't a fantasy. This isn't some futuristic theory. This is happening right now, and it's not loud. It's not public. Because the smartest plans are never shouted from podiums. They're written in code, in thermal images, in intercepted radio chatter. You want to know how serious a nation is about reclaiming its land? Don't look at its speeches. Look at where it places its satellites. Look at how many drones are flying overhead without anyone noticing. Look at the pattern recognition software tracking the exact times and locations of troop rotations inside enemy territory. That's where you find intent. That's where you find purpose. India, with Israel's quiet partnership, is building an eye in the sky so detailed that POK is no longer a mystery. It's a monitored zone. It's a chessboard with every piece being tracked. This isn't about paranoia. It's about precision. Because you can't reclaim what you can't see. And now, India sees everything. Daytime, nighttime, fog, snow. It doesn't matter. With high-resolution imaging from Indian and Israeli satellites working together, the ground truth is constantly updated. Troop movement, infrastructure expansion, ammunition stockpiling, even underground bunkers. It's all being marked, cataloged, understood. But that's just the sky. Let's talk about the ground. Border areas are now equipped with layered surveillance, motion sensors, thermal cameras, AI-driven detection systems that can differentiate between a wild animal and a camouflaged intruder. Every pass, every ridge, every potential infiltration point is being digitally fenced. There's no such thing as blind spots anymore. Not when you've got Israeli UAV flying synchronized patterns and Indian data centers crunching the feed in real time. And what makes this even more powerful is that it's not just about surveillance. It's about integration. These aren't isolated systems doing their own thing. They're connected, interlinked, learning from each other. When an unusual heat signature is picked up on a hillside, it's cross-referenced with prior movement patterns, drone footage from earlier that day, and local chatter being picked up by signal interceptors. If the system flags it as a probable threat, response units get notified instantly. That's how fast it is. That's how clean it is. The days of slow decision-making are over. And let's not forget the human intelligence layer. POK isn't just being watched from above, it's being understood from within. There's groundwork being done. Deep groundwork being done. Deep groundwork. Communities inside POK that are disillusioned, ignored, and hurting are quietly becoming sources of truth. And this isn't about coercion. It's about connection. It's about listening, providing, creating bonds that no amount of enemy propaganda can erase. Because if you want to reclaim a place, you start by reclaiming the people. And India, with a clear understanding of the psychological landscape, is doing that. Patiently, steadily. What Israel brings to this operation isn't just hardware. It's a legacy of intelligence warfare. A legacy of knowing how to anticipate instead of react, how to strike only when you're sure, how to make every move count because you already know how your opponent will respond. That's the kind of thinking India is now weaving into its own strategies. It's no longer about strength alone. It's about foresight. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're informed. And India is no longer operating in the dark. The old days of uncertainty, of having to guess what was happening behind enemy lines, are over. Now there's clarity, vision, insight. And that changes everything, because the more you see, the less you guess. And the less you guess, the more precise your actions become. So while the world talks about diplomacy, while media debates the what of Zendia, is already playing the when to move, when to disable, when to reclaim. And when that time comes, it won't be out of anger. It'll be out of absolute clarity. Because when you map every inch of the fight, you don't just gain control over territory, you gain control over time. And when you control time, you win before the world even realizes you've begun. People think silence means nothing is happening, that if you're not talking about it, you're not working on it. But anyone who truly understands power knows that silence is never empty. It's full of calculation, full of movement, full of strategic patience. And right now, when it comes to POK, India isn't broadcasting its intentions to the world. It's doing something far more dangerous. It's staying quiet, because silence doesn't mean weakness. Silence means you're letting your actions, not your noise, do the talking. Diplomacy has become the perfect cover. While panelists argue on TV screens, while international watchdogs try to guess what's going on, India is calmly building capacity, calibrating intelligence, and aligning partnerships that don't need press releases to be powerful. There's no need to issue warnings when you're already 10 steps ahead. There's no need to declare anything when the plans are already in motion. This isn't a war of words. It's a war of will, and will doesn't shout. It listens, learns, and then it strikes only when the timing is right. The truth is, silence creates pressure. It unsettles the other side. Because the moment you stop reacting to provocation, the game changes. They don't know what you're thinking, when you'll move, or what's coming next. That's real power, uncertainty. And right now, India's silence is building exactly that. It's creating a vacuum that forces the opposition to guess. And in warfare, guessing is losing. Every time the enemy pushes a narrative, India doesn't match it with equal noise. It counters it with strategy. When they talk of aggression, India responds with restraint. When they stage dramatics, India doubles down on discipline. Not because it's afraid, but because it's focused. Precision doesn't live in chaos. It lives in control. And control requires silence. Behind the scenes, things are moving. Relationships are strengthening. Capabilities are evolving. The military isn't flexing for cameras. It's training harder. Satellites aren't broadcasting. They're watching. Special forces aren't making statements. They're rehearsing for moments that matter. And in all this, there's one thing that keeps it all intact: silence. Because the less you speak, the less you reveal. And the less you reveal, the more you protect what truly matters. Your next move. What the world forgets is that diplomacy is sometimes a tool of delay. It gives the illusion of discussion while you prepare for decision. And India is using that illusion perfectly, engaging just enough to keep global eyes looking elsewhere, while underneath it's tightening its circle, cutting through misinformation, and setting the stage for action that doesn't need validation. You don't wait for permission to reclaim what's yours. You prepare, you position, and then you proceed with or without applause. And let's be clear, the silence isn't passive. It's active. It's calculated. Because in silence, India is listening to everything. Every international statement, every regional shift, every drone movement, every narrative twist. Silence makes you a better observer. And right now, India is not reacting emotionally. It's responding intelligently. That's the difference. Anyone can shout, but very few can wait with purpose. And purpose is what's driving the strategy. This isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about choosing the right moment. Because the goal isn't just to act, it's to act with impact. It's to act with impact. And when you understand that, you stop needing to prove anything. You just focus on being ready. And readiness doesn't come from speeches, it comes from silence. Focused, intentional silence. The world may not see what's coming, but that's by design. Because by the time India does speak, really speak, it won't be with words. It'll be with results. And those results won't just change borders. They'll change balance, because a nation that knows when to stay quiet also knows exactly when to rise. So don't mistake the calm for inaction. Don't confuse diplomacy with delay. What you're seeing is not hesitation. Oh, it's preparation. Quiet, relentless, unstoppable preparation. And when silence finally breaks, it will not ask for attention. It will command it. There was a time when the only way people thought you could reclaim what was taken from you was through brute force, march in, guns blazing, flags waving, and overwhelm everything in your path. But that kind of war, that kind of thinking, it belongs to another era. Because today, the goal isn't just to reclaim territory. It's to do it without leaving it in ruins. It's to win in a way that creates stability, not another generation of chaos. And that shift from traditional war to smart conflict is exactly what's defining India's quiet, calculated strategy around POK. What if I told you that reclaiming doesn't always mean destroying? That taking back what's yours doesn't have to come with the cost of scorched earth and broken lives. See, that's the difference between reaction and intention. Traditional war reacts. Smart conflict designs. Traditional war overwhelms. Smart conflict infiltrates. Traditional war makes a statement. Smart conflict makes a future. India is playing the long game. And in that long game, it's not about charging into POK to raise a flag and declare victory. It's about preparing the ground so thoroughly, so intelligently, that when the moment comes, the transition doesn't trigger collapse. It triggers clarity. It's not about destroying the structures on the other side of the line of control. It's about building something better that can outlast the tension and the noise. This is about leveraging technology, alliances, intelligence, and timing, not just to fight, but to prevent the need for fighting in the first place. Because smart conflict is about control. It's about knowing how to bend pressure, not break under it. It's about using satellites, data mapping, human intelligence, and cyber disruption to weaken the very foundation of instability. Quietly. You don't dismantle an opposing position by firing the first shot. You dismantle it by making sure that when the shot comes, it's the only one you'll need. Smart conflict is about influence. It's about making sure the people inside POK don't see India as an invader, but as a future they were promised and denied. And that kind of narrative shift doesn't happen with boots on the ground. It happens with trust on the ground. Winning hearts doesn't come from marching armies. It comes from showing up in ways that matter. in resources, in relief, in support networks that don't make headlines but change lives. When people inside a conflict zone begin to whisper that your presence would make their lives better, not worse, that's when you're truly reclaiming something. Not just land, but loyalty. And let's not pretend this isn't hard. It is. It's far easier to blow something up than to rebuild it from within. But smart conflict isn't about what's easy. It's about what works. And what works is sustainability. What works is preparation. What works is using every available tool to minimize destruction and maximize direction. Look at how operations are shifting. It's no longer about battalions. It's about elite units trained in specialized environments, equipped with Israeli precision systems, capable of neutralizing threats without igniting larger fires. It's about psychological operations that expose disinformation and replace it with undeniable truth. It's about supply chain disruptions, currency pressure, cyber interventions, all those invisible levers that tilt power without ever being televised. You win by making your moves so quiet and so efficient that by the time resistance realizes what's happening, the ground has already shifted beneath them. That's the play. Not to force, but to flip narratives, to flip control, to flip belief. So when India steps in, it's not seen as an aggressor, but as a restorer. And that shift, that subtle but powerful shift, it changes everything because the goal here isn't revenge, it's resolution. It's not about turning POK into a battlefield. It's about making sure it doesn't stay a breeding ground for instability. That's where intelligence, discipline, and smart strategy come in to protect what you reclaim, to preserve what you've fought for, to make sure that when the dust settles, there's something left standing that's worth having. Traditional war ends with destruction. Smart conflict ends with a decision, by all sides, that this chapter is over, that the cost of chaos is no longer worth paying. And that kind of ending only comes when you've moved with so much clarity and so much strategy that peace becomes the only logical outcome. So no, India isn't planning a war in the old sense. It's preparing a shift that doesn't just reclaim geography, it reclaims stability. Because reclaiming without ruin, that's not just strategy, that's strength. Some things in life are uncertain. They shift with time, bend under pressure, or fade with distraction. But then there are things that are inevitable. Not because someone says so, not because of emotion or anger, but because history, truth, and timing have already lined up in their favor. And when it comes to POK, we're not talking about a question of if. If. We're talking about when. That's how certain the return. That's how undeniable the momentum has become. Because this isn't just about reclaiming a piece of land. It's about restoring a truth that's been delayed, not denied. See, the thing people don't always understand is that the most powerful forces aren't always visible. They build beneath the surface. Quietly, gradually. But when they rise, they don't ask for permission. They arrive, and right now that force is building in the minds of citizens who are waking up, in the confidence of a nation that no longer doubts its right to finish what history started, and in the strategic, calculated way India has positioned itself not as a reactionary force, but as one that's been preparing, aligning, and moving with purpose. There's a reason why POK never fades from the national consciousness. It's not just political, it's personal, it's ancestral. It's about identity. And when something becomes part of a nation's soul, it doesn't just disappear. It may get buried for a while under diplomacy, international pressure, global agendas, but it doesn't die. It waits. And that's what POK has been for India. For waiting. A deep, disciplined patience that's now shifting into something more focused, more present, more ready. All the pieces are falling into place. You see it in the way India has strengthened its defenses, diversified its alliances, and modernized its warfare. You see it in the precision of its intelligence operations, the psychological groundwork being laid, the soft power being extended inside those regions. You see it in the way voices within POK itself are changing, from silence to frustration to quiet hope. That's not coincidence. That's the result of long-term preparation colliding with a moment of alignment. Because the truth is, POK is already changing. Not officially, not on paper, but in reality. When the infrastructure starts to rot from the inside, when governance breaks down, when trust in the old systems erodes to the point where people start looking for something different, that's when change has already begun. And it's happening. on the ground, in the air, across every digital thread that binds a region to instability. India is not waiting for the green light from the world. It's simply waiting for the right moment to flip the script. And when it does, the world will simply have to catch up. That's why this isn't about waving flags and raising fists. It's about showing up with more than words, with stability, with systems, with strategy. Because when India reclaims POK, it won't be out of aggression. It'll be out of alignment. Legal, historical, emotional, strategic alignment. And when all those layers come together, it creates a force that can't be held back by opinion or opposition. You can delay justice, but you can't erase it. You can redraw lines on maps, but you can't erase the pulse of a nation that still beats for what was lost. India hasn't forgotten. It's just been preparing, silently, intelligently, unshakably. And now, that preparation is reaching a tipping point. One where the return of POK won't need justification. It'll be the most logical next step. And make no mistake, this isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. It's about bringing back what rightfully belongs, not just in name, but in spirit. It's about finishing a story that started decades ago and was paused, not ended. And now the conclusion is starting to write itself, not with bombs, but with clarity, with unity, with power that doesn't scream, but stands. So when people ask if POK will ever return to India, they're asking the wrong question. Because the answer isn't in possibility, it's in timing. And the clock is moving, quietly, deliberately, relentlessly, because this isn't just a hope. It's an inevitability.